There's something extraordinary about a nation that has stood the test of time, not for decades, not for centuries, but for thousands of years. India carries within it a depth of cultural identity that's impossible to replicate or destroy. It's like trying to erase the roots of a massive ancient tree that has weathered storms, droughts, and invasions. The roots only dig deeper. This identity isn't some surface-level pride that shifts with political winds. It is carved into the very soul of every Indian. From the rhythmic beats of classical music that echo centuries of devotion to the vibrant festivals that light up its cities and villages alike, India's culture is a living, breathing force. It's not a museum piece. It's dynamic, evolving, and fiercely protected by its people. You can walk the streets of Varanasi, one of the world's oldest continuously inhabited cities, and feel the pulse of a civilization that existed long before modern nations were even conceived. Empires have risen and fallen. Invaders have come with swords, with guns, with ships and strategies. They've tried to impose new languages, new religions, new rules. But India never surrendered its core. It integrated influences without losing its essence. Even when British rule attempted to rewrite its systems, to westernize its thinking, to control its education and economy, India held on to something deeper. It didn't matter if policies changed, rulers changed, or borders changed. The spiritual practices continued, the family structures remained strong, the languages survived, the temples still stood, the rituals still took place at sunrise on riverbanks across the country. This is a resilience that comes not from political power, but from generational wisdom, passed from parent to child, from teacher to student, from story to story. When you try to conquer people, you aim to break their identity, to make them forget who they are. But India's identity isn't something taught in classrooms. It's lived in daily life. It's in the spices blended in every kitchen, the mantras whispered at dawn, the stories of gods and heroes that children grow up hearing, the weddings that are festivals themselves, and the respect for elders that shapes every household. Every layer of Indian life reinforces the idea that no matter what happens outside, who you are inside remains unshakable. That's why foreign powers found it so frustrating. They could impose laws, but they couldn't replace values. They could collect taxes, but they couldn't buy loyalty. They could govern cities, but they couldn't own the hearts of the people. Even today you see this fierce cultural pride when Indians celebrate their heritage globally. Whether it's yoga studios in New York, Bollywood dominating international screens, or Indian cuisine becoming a global favorite, India's cultural roots are not just surviving, they're thriving. And it's not because anyone allowed it, it's because the identity was never up for negotiation. It doesn't seek approval, it doesn't ask permission, it simply exists, confidently, defiantly, proudly. And that is why even the most powerful forces in history have failed to defeat it. Adaptability isn't just a skill India has mastered, it's the very rhythm that beats at its core. While other nations might panic when faced with disruption, India leans in, studies the storm, adjusts its sails, and finds a way to keep moving forward. From the moment of its ancient beginnings, India has absorbed waves of influence without losing its identity. Invasions, colonization, political shifts, economic crises, each challenge has tested India's ability to survive. But survival was never enough. India chose to evolve. It took what came from the outside, examined it, modified it, and turned it into something uniquely its own. Persian architecture merged with Hindu temples to create monuments that still leave visitors in awe. Foreign religions were welcomed, debated, and allowed to coexist alongside ancient faiths. Languages from across the world were adopted and integrated into everyday speech, creating a tapestry of communication that is as diverse as its people. And through every phase, India didn't just copy, it created. That is the magic of adaptability when it's fueled by confidence rather than fear. When the British arrived, they tried to impose their systems of governance, education, and economy. And yes, they had their impact, but India watched, learned, and used the very tools that were meant to control it to build a modern nation. The English language, once a symbol of imperial rule, became a weapon of global influence. Today, India produces some of the world's best English-speaking scientists, authors, and leaders who can engage with the West on equal footing, if not superior. The very mechanisms of colonial rule became stepping stones for future growth. India never rejected modernity, it adapted it in a way that fit into its ancient framework. You see this every day in its bustling cities, where ancient temples stand beside cutting-edge tech hubs, where cows walk alongside luxury cars, and where spiritual gurus share space with entrepreneurs pitching billion-dollar startups. This seamless coexistence isn't chaos, it's adaptability at its finest. Even in the face of economic globalization, where powerful Western corporations sought to dominate emerging markets, India refused to become a mere consumer. Instead, it built its own industries, created its own giants, and pushed back with innovation. The IT revolution wasn't handed to India. It was seized through determination, education, and a willingness to pivot when opportunities appeared. When Western nations tried to control technology markets, India produced engineers who now lead Silicon Valley's biggest companies. This ability to watch, learn, and pivot isn't luck. It's a mindset woven into generations of Indians who have seen their parents, grandparents, and ancestors do exactly the same. In times of crisis like the global pandemic, while many countries struggled with rigid systems, India mobilized an unprecedented vaccination campaign, developed its own vaccines, and provided medical assistance not only for itself, but for other nations as well. It wasn't perfect, but it was fast, adaptive, and relentlessly forward-looking. The world watched as a nation of over 1 billion people adapted with speed and scale that many thought impossible. That's the secret weapon. Adaptability, driven by resilience and creativity, not dictated by external pressures. It's an internal engine that keeps finding new ways forward, even when the path seems blocked. And that is why every time someone has tried to knock India down, it rises stronger, smarter, and more determined than before. There's an unstoppable force building inside India. And it's not made of missiles or military might. It's made of people, young people, millions upon millions of energetic, hungry, ambitious young men and women who are not waiting for permission to rewrite the future. India's greatest asset right now isn't its geography or even its economy. It's its youth. This is a country where over 65% of the population is under 35 years old. That means while other nations are facing aging populations, shrinking workforces, and slowing innovation, India is standing on the brink of something extraordinary. The sheer size of this youthful population isn't just a number. It's a fire that's spreading across industries, across borders, across every imaginable platform of influence. They are not shackled by the past. They are fueled by possibilities. Walk into any college campus, startup incubator, or small-town internet cafe and you'll see it. Eyes filled with bold ideas, voices challenging old narratives, fingers typing code that will soon run global companies. These young Indians aren't trapped by limitations of history or burdened by the scars of colonial rule. They've inherited the lessons, but they're writing a new chapter. They're multilingual, digitally native, globally aware, and fiercely proud of their roots. They can quote ancient scriptures and pitch venture capitalists in Silicon Valley all in the same breath. That blend of deep cultural grounding with a fearless global outlook makes them one of the most potent forces the world has ever seen. The West has always relied on a narrative of control, dominate economically, lead technologically, and dictate culturally. But how do you defeat a generation that is inventing its own industries, building its own unicorn companies, and creating a cultural soft power that reaches every corner of the globe? Bollywood films dominate global streaming platforms, Indian musicians are collaborating with international artists, and Indian fashion influences runways in New York and Paris. This generation doesn't wait for an invitation to the global stage. They create their own stage and the world watches. You see 22-year-olds developing apps used by millions, young scientists leading breakthroughs in AI, biotech, and space exploration, and artists whose work goes viral worldwide in minutes. This isn't just talent. It's ambition multiplied by numbers that the West can't match. When you combine a youthful population with access to technology, education, and an entrepreneurial spirit, you get a demographic tsunami that no external power can control. The West can try to compete, but they can't replicate India's population advantage. They can't manufacture this energy, this volume, this hunger for growth. And it's not just happening in the big cities. It's spreading in smaller towns and rural areas as well. The internet has made global knowledge accessible, and with it comes a new wave of creators, innovators, and thinkers who aren't confined by geography or status. These young Indians are aware of global challenges, climate change, inequality, digital security, and they are stepping up to offer solutions not just for India, but for the world. And there's something even more powerful at play here. Belief. This generation believes they belong at the table. They don't see themselves as followers of Western leadership. They see themselves as equals, as leaders, as creators of new systems. They are not asking if India will lead. They are asking how soon. That psychological shift is something the West never anticipated. For decades, the world underestimated India's potential. But this generation refuses to play by those outdated expectations. They've watched previous generations work hard to survive. Now they are working hard to thrive. It's not just a demographic advantage, it's a cultural momentum that keeps accelerating. Every young Indian carries within them the stories of resilience from their ancestors, the wisdom of ancient texts, and the ambition of a new digital era. That combination is rare, and it's dangerous for anyone who tries to slow it down or control it. Because once a population this massive starts moving forward together, driven by vision instead of fear, there's no force on earth that can stop it. There's a kind of power that doesn't come from weapons, money, or politics. It comes from within. It's invisible, yet unbreakable. That's the kind of strength India has carried for thousands of years, a spiritual backbone so deep and wide that it has shaped every layer of society. While the world measures strength by material success, India has mastered a different game entirely. This is a country where millions wake up at dawn, bowing their heads in prayer, chanting mantras, lighting lamps, and connecting with something far greater than themselves. This connection to the divine isn't limited to rituals. It is woven into the very fabric of life. In every village, in every city, across every language, there exists a quiet confidence that life is more than just accumulation. It is purpose, it is karma, it is dharma. This spiritual grounding has given India an unshakable center. When you have that, you don't panic in the face of crisis. You don't collapse when threatened. You stay steady because you know the storm will pass. History has thrown countless storms at India. Invasions came one after another. Foreign rulers tried to dominate its lands, impose their values, control its wealth, and break its will. But they underestimated the invisible force that held everything together, the collective inner strength of a spiritually grounded people. When your identity is rooted in timeless wisdom, when your existence is anchored in philosophies that transcend borders and politics, you become impossible to fully defeat. Even today, in a hyper-distracted world where people chase instant gratification, India remains a global center for meditation, yoga, mindfulness, and holistic living. People from all over the world travel to Indian ashrams, temples, and mountains, searching for what Indians have carried quietly for generations: peace that isn't dependent on external circumstances. This spiritual wealth has become a form of soft power that the West can't replicate. It's not something you can buy or negotiate for. It's something cultivated through discipline, humility, and generational wisdom. And what's even more extraordinary is how this spiritual grounding coexists with modern life. You'll see a tech entrepreneur in Bangalore close a multi-million-dollar deal, then bow his head at a temple for blessings. You'll find scientists working on cutting-edge research who pause for moments of meditation before presenting their work. This isn't contradiction, it's balance. The ability to remain centered while engaging with a fast-paced world is what gives India its unique resilience. While others burn out, chasing external definitions of success, Indians return to an internal reservoir of calm that has been filled by centuries of spiritual practice. The West has often mistaken this for passivity, but it is anything but that. This inner strength gives Indians the clarity to choose their battles, to remain patient, to play the long game. They don't need to dominate every conversation or rush every victory. The confidence comes from knowing that real power isn't always loud or aggressive. Sometimes it's quiet, steady, and enduring. And that kind of power is nearly impossible to break. There's a rare kind of defiance that doesn't come from arrogance but from clarity. It's the kind of defiance that comes when a nation knows exactly who it is and refuses to be anyone else. That's the foundation of India's strategic independence. In a world where alliances shift like sand, where smaller nations are often pressured to pick sides, to follow the lead of global superpowers, India stands tall, charting its own course. It doesn't follow blindly. It listens, it observes, it calculates, and then it decides what serves its long-term interest. This isn't the kind of independence that only exists on paper. It's alive. In every decision, every negotiation, every policy that India makes on the global stage. For decades, powerful nations have tried to pull India closer into their orbit, hoping to secure an ally they can control. But India resists that gravitational pull every single time. Whether it's in trade agreements, defense partnerships, climate negotiations, or global conflicts, India plays by its own rules. It doesn't isolate itself, but it refuses to be anyone's pawn. That strategic independence frustrates those who expect loyalty in exchange for favors. They underestimate India's deep understanding of balance. The same balance, rooted in its spiritual traditions, flows into its diplomacy. It knows when to engage and when to hold back, when to cooperate and when to stand firm. It maintains relationships with competing powers simultaneously: the West, Russia, Middle Eastern nations, Asian neighbors, and does so without compromising its core interests. Even during moments of global tension, India refuses to surrender its decision-making power. When others expect sanctions, India evaluates what's truly beneficial for its people and acts accordingly. When pressured to adopt foreign policies that don't align with its national priorities, India calmly declines, choosing instead to build partnerships based on mutual respect rather than submission. That ability to stand firm while staying open to dialogue is a strength few nations have mastered. It sends a message. India isn't desperate for validation. It won't be bullied. It won't be manipulated by fear or flattery. At the heart of this independence is a deep-rooted confidence in its own potential. India doesn't see itself as a junior partner in global affairs. It sees itself as a sovereign nation with the right and the ability to shape its destiny. And that confidence isn't based on military might or economic size alone. It's built on a history of overcoming every force that tried to control it. Every generation of Indians carries the lessons of colonization, the struggle for freedom, and the triumph of self-determination. That history fuels a national mindset that rejects dependency in all its forms. Strategic independence is more than just refusing to take orders. It's about knowing when to collaborate without compromising integrity, when to negotiate without sacrificing dignity, and when to act decisively without waiting for external approval. This mindset makes India unpredictable to those who try to box it into fixed alliances or rigid policies. It can't be cornered, it can't be bribed, and it can't be easily swayed. That's why attempts to control it have repeatedly failed. There's a silent force moving through the global economy, and it's gaining speed every single day. It doesn't roar with noise, but its presence is undeniable. India's economic momentum is no longer a potential, it's a reality. Decades ago, when the world looked at India, they saw poverty, underdevelopment, and bureaucracy, but those who were truly paying attention saw something else. A sleeping giant quietly preparing for its rise. That rise is now impossible to ignore. The numbers are staggering: a rapidly expanding middle class, millions of new businesses, booming consumer markets, and some of the world's most innovative tech hubs. But these aren't just statistics. They represent a nation that has learned to turn its complex diversity into a competitive advantage. The West has always thrived on maintaining dominance in global finance, technology, and innovation, assuming that emerging nations would forever play catch-up. But India shattered that assumption. Instead of merely following Western models, India carved out its own path, combining tradition with innovation in ways that most couldn't anticipate. Look at its technology sector. Homegrown IT giants like Infosys, TCS, and Wipro not only serve domestic needs but lead major global operations for Fortune 500 companies. Indian engineers, programmers, and entrepreneurs drive some of the most important technological advancements worldwide. And while Western economies worry about talent shortages, India produces an ocean of highly skilled professionals year after year, trained in both technical expertise and multilingual communication, ready to operate at a global level. Then there's India's massive startup ecosystem, one of the fastest growing on the planet. In fintech, edtech, health tech, and AI, Indian entrepreneurs are not waiting for Western solutions. They're building world-class platforms that serve not only India's billion-plus consumers, but global markets as well. The unicorn count keeps rising, not by accident, but by design. With supportive government initiatives like Startup India, a growing venture capital presence, and a population that embraces digital innovation faster than most, India's economic engine isn't just accelerating, it's rewriting the playbook. And it's not just about technology. India's manufacturing sector is undergoing a silent revolution. As global supply chains face disruption, companies are increasingly looking to India as a reliable alternative to China. The Make in India movement isn't a slogan, it's a strategic pivot that positions India as a key global manufacturing hub in sectors ranging from pharmaceuticals to automobiles to electronics. Foreign investors recognize this shift and are pouring billions into infrastructure, industrial development, and research facilities, betting on India's long-term growth. While economic momentum builds, India's global influence is spreading in ways that no one power can fully control. Cultural soft power radiates through Bollywood films, Indian music, literature, cuisine, yoga, and spiritual teachings, captivating audiences worldwide. The world doesn't just consume Indian products, it consumes Indian ideas, lifestyles, and philosophies. This cultural influence builds emotional connections that create goodwill and respect across continents, something traditional power structures can't buy or dictate. Politically, India's voice carries more weight than ever before. Whether at the G20, BRICS, or UN forums, India speaks not as a follower but as a leader, representing not just its own interests but the aspirations of many developing nations. It's a unique position, a bridge between the established West and the rising global South, and the world is paying attention because India's decisions increasingly shape global outcomes in trade, climate policy, technology standards, and international security. The West can no longer afford to see India as a developing nation on the sidelines. It is a crucial player whose cooperation is essential in everything from combating pandemics to stabilizing regional conflicts to addressing global economic shifts. And this new reality frustrates those who once assumed they could dictate terms. India doesn't need permission to lead. It does so because its economic strength, cultural richness, and political independence command respect. No longer the subject of someone else's narrative, India is writing its own story, one that millions around the world are watching, learning from, and increasingly choosing to be a part of.